Ryan,
Hello, Ben.
so glad that you've offered to tell your summit story, and I'm really excited to hear kind of the journey that you went on. My sense is that even for people who only registered and never actually showed up, which is not you, um, there's an interesting story about how they heard about it and what led them to decide to register and why they didn't then participate. So I feel like there might be 500, we had almost 600 registrants of those stories, but some are going to be much more interesting than others. And I have a feeling, no pressure, but yours will be one of them, and I'm delighted to record it.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Ben, for accepting my invitation to co-sense making connect after after what was a beautiful and very interesting and unexpected, and dare I say, surprising experience of the summit.
Fancy that. You were open space was surprising.
Ta-da, ta-da.
Seems
There's
tell
a
people to be
signal that,
prepared for that, right?
yeah, be prepared for that. And so I became aware of the summit through a mention of it in a board meeting of the Open Space Institute of the US. And Harold Shinsato mentioned it that you and Peggy were convening this thing. And then I was like, that sounds interesting. And then I saw a message in the OS list from Peggy that kind of said, here's the thing. And hmm, okay. Well, that feels like whatever we might have been planning with the Open Space Institute would really, we would have to prepare and do all sorts of stuff to even kind of approach what you had already been designing and were planning to offer. And we said, hey, why don't we throw our support into this effort and then dive in and be with it? And at that point, I was in rapt anticipation of what would happen and kind of knowing you and some of the forms and fashions of how you do events. I kind of had an idea, a little idea, not a full expectation of what I was getting into. And the first experience I had in it was with a one-on-one conversation that I really enjoyed having, and
Can I,
with a
before we even get to that, I think something else happened that's worth noting, right? Is that our first connection about the summit was on LinkedIn, and that was
oh
hilarious.
that's that because yeah, um, so you didn't at that point you didn't know that I was aware and was kind of I was landing into it. Oh, that's right. Hmm.
I'd forgotten
So
until you were describing. Oh, you heard about through the Open Space Institute, like, right? Because I wrote you a message on LinkedIn, and you were in the process of writing me a message on LinkedIn, right?
indeed, indeed, I was.
You heard about the summit and you were excited. I'm like at the exact same moment. I hit send and I get this reply. I'm like, wait a minute, are you telling me what I think you're telling me? That was right now.
Indeed, indeed. And I think I ended up probably sharing it in that point because it's
Hmm.
with all of the just the energy of all the folks who were con getting towards landing and convening and doing the with Barrett Kohler, um, with Peggy, who Harold and I had interviewed a while back, Open Space and knowing you and like all that stuff. It just felt like so many people would be drawn to that event that it would be great to engage with it in any way. And that has been true to form. And so I had this as part of the process. Now, I wasn't really familiar with this. I think Peggy does something like that or has done before. And again, you may have too, but the idea of seeding the connection prior to the event. Boy, I loved that. And it was just, and it's fantastic. Um, and I had some grief that my conversation partner didn't show up at the summit, but okay. Either way, I landed and um, it was a little daunting at first, because there's a lot of stuff to do, and there was a sense of um, that your invitation to the summit, opened up, as I was talking about, this sparkle of possibilities, you know, and the then a sense of, oh, well, if to convene a session, there's this crafting of your own invitation to it, and this intentionality that was, it felt different and felt good, and there was, I think, again, my one of my guys in the world that I, you know, guru, whatever, um, Seth Godin talks about this tension, to create tension, forward motion and tension to go together, and that the the invitation to craft a coherent invitation, um, was for me, is very generative. It got out a sense of, oh, what am I going to take ownership of? What am I going to commit to?
Mhm.
And
And that was
because I,
that's for phase two you're talking about, right?
well, yeah, but I think I was already kind of, looking at some, it's because there was so much preparation, that it was obvious that you did so much preparation to have the phase one, the phase two, and that it was a bounded a open space, and then a divergence, and then a convergence into a second open space, or kind of a open space, which is uh, a formation of change framework, or whatever, a change pattern that I really feel deeply with and committed to. So that also played into, oh, I really want to dive into that, because there was this phase two there.
Right. And
Um,
you did show up for phase one, I think, right? You were
oh,
in, yeah, one of those
yeah, well,
circles, maybe more
well,
than one.
I was in phase one, and I couldn't, well, because I'm a real early riser. I had the possibility of maybe going to all three circles, possibly. And it's like, do I really want to commit that much? Am I overcommitting? Well, then that was a pattern I identify that overcommitment.
Mm,
But and again, in retrospect, looking at that, I didn't feel the pressure to convene a session to in one of these other circles, but I was so happy to be a participant, or a butterfly or bumblebee in that session, just to see what was there, and
mhm.
to ramp up into the space by that. So that was, again, these 24-hour open spaces, getting used to the global nature of them, and how you can detach yourself from the time boundary as open space allows you to do, and to do that in a very explicit and literal way. So, yeah, I landed into phase one softly from the European circle, and then into the North American time zone circle.
Mhm.
And um so, and a Kiko open space, I've been to a number of them, so that was not unfamiliar to me at all. Um and the just the and for those of you watching this, you may know open space technology, you may not. It is not a terribly complicated frame of doing stuff. I will assume that the folks watching this have some knowledge of it, and I won't have to go into it. Um, but yeah, um, so for me, phase one, I I was happily surprised that that people came to my sessions, both of them. And they were new people. They weren't just, hey, I know Ryan, I know his bit, I know this whole my themes, organizational musicianship, and the music of work, which has lots of meaning for me. And it's something I definitely really have passion about and want to explore with many people, because it's really important to me, and I want to connect with other people for whom it is also important, and feels like it's got juice to it. So that was what, probably, I would say, one of the deepest, um, one of the gifts, one of the deepest gifts I've received was these new connections. I have another new connection this week with someone who I came in contact with at the summit. And I've had all these conversations that have happened as a result. And in the middle of so that was phase one, gave the connections. It was that harvesting of humanity into the theme that I put out there. And the other parts of the getting from phase one to phase two, there was a little bumpiness there. But here's the thing for me. I think because I know you and because I know the tools that resonate with you, the Sum app and Kumu and Kiko together, I felt a deeper commitment to getting to know those tools better and how to use them for me and to help me get the invitation going. So that was a leveling up that I experienced from phase one to phase two, and which leads me to be even more curious about what might happen for the next iteration of the summit. And but I'm not great at team up, and I'm a little frustrated at team up. So just I don't have skill at it yet, and I know the skill progression to mastery takes a while. So, but there's that, and then getting into phase two, and again, my detachment from time. Oh, phase two was when I had to go in and say, based on what I did in phase one, to bring that into what kind of engagement I want to have for phase two. And that was okay. All right, now I gotta put myself in the driver's seat and articulate the intent. And that process was it was generative for me. I grew through the process. And also I set some goals for myself. If I was my commitment, I did not meet my commitments. No, I came close. So there was an aspiration, and then I have a little bit of frustration and guilt with myself about not being able to meet this 8 hours a week, 4 group sessions I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And looking back, and I did spend a significant amount, I probably spent half that maybe in the conversations. And I hosted I participated in a large 10-person meetup around that theme that I invited at phase one, and generated some new connections that connected those old connections together. And the thinking process within myself that I took prior to the summit, prior to this meetup, it really allowed my theme to integrate more and come into connection with it. So yeah, that was phase, and then the closing of phase two. I wasn't
Before we
quite
go there for a sec, can I
oh
jump?
sure.
I'm
I gotta
looking.
take a drink because I've been yammering so much.
Sure. I'm looking at at the summit map and a focus view of your invitation and the people who responded via the map. So here you are. Here's your beautiful invitation, purple, of course. And we have my old friend Tuomas, a lover of open space from Finland, who, like Akiko, was very active in the Now What global gatherings. Tuomas more in the beginning, Akiko more in the end. Todd Johnson, I don't know. Francois, of course, I think we both know, active in open space and Kiko chat. John Warner, I don't know. I think he might be a BK author. Ian Culver, I got to know through the summit. He really showed up quite a bit and was a very interesting young man. Ida Bliavate, didn't encounter them at all. Sylvia, I think I remember her from phase one and being intrigued by her. So it's a really nice connection of people that responded directly via the map. I imagine, some people also just looked at the invitation that you put together quite beautifully and maybe responded to you directly that way. Um, or
Well,
you said you did do a call, an open call, and that was on the team up calendar too.
I did, and it was a little awkward. Yeah, it was not as well designed as the invitation, and it showed my lack of skill in team up, because I had it tied up right into my meetup. The meetup I did, and then I wanted to have folks join in this after the meetup to kind of go deeper. And the folks in the summit had already gone deeper. The folks in the meetup were just introduced to the topic, and I wanted to convene that together. Didn't work how I intended.
Uh-huh.
But if you bring up can you bring up the invitation again? Because that brought up for me a little bit more, maybe to share with you how this happened, some of the beauty of it. That I even now, just this morning, I actually over this weekend and this morning, I've crafted an invitation to a community I want to build around this theme, and asked all of these folks to test it because I then had their email addresses and they gave me some valuable feedback and inspired me to do some additional work and maybe change how I'm going to do my ongoing work. And I've contact with each of the people on the map. Either it's Francois. I had my first one-on-one really with him this morning, even though I had been familiar with him from years before. And Ida, I had a one-on-one with her. Sylvia and I had a fantastic email conversation. Tomas, I forget you pronounce it beautifully. I didn't know how it's
Tumas.
pronounced.
I believe it's
Tomas.
Tumas.
Termis. And on the John Warner, I met through Tony Budak's open space.
Oh,
And John and I also had several really deep conversations over time. He is also in the musical mode, poet mode, and just super helpful. Um, and Akiko, again, I came to know through this additional that she showed her curiosity, and it was the fact that I had a space to that's so cute.
mhm.
Um, I had a space to work on the invitation that I had for my where I'm passionate about, to gather more folks to it and to energize the activity within phase two. And then um, in the closing circle, it was it was powerful. I didn't get to attend the whole circle because I had a doctor's appointment, but I was again felt welcome to come in, and I felt welcome to speak a challenge to the room. And I didn't quite hear the resonance with that challenge directly, but I folks had reached out to me after that, and they really wanted um to go deeper into the challenge that I raised.
Remind me
So
what it was. I'm sure I'll remember when you name it.
uh how might we come together with those who hold us in contempt?
Right, right.
And there was some more word salad on top of that, but that was the core of it. And what might become possible if we from both these places release that contempt and move toward curiosity, which Contempt to Curiosity is the name of a book by Caitlin Walker,
Mm.
which is wonderful, and she's big in the clean language space. But that what might what might be possible to instead of the othering, and to use the togethering, which is a word I love to bring into the space. And that,
Gathering.
yeah, it's
There's a word
exactly
in
the opposite.
Spanish, a Colombian term that I think has some indigenous roots to juntanza.
Untanza.
Tanza, Juntanza, which I think might loosely translate as togethering also. And the Ubuntu, of course, is related. There's a whole collection
Ubuntu.
of those words, by the way, that the Weaving Lab put together a while ago. But
Oh, and
juntanza,
there's like
I really loved.
and the Mayan, the Imlakesh Halaken, that was one of my friends who's from that domain. It's very interesting how these linguistic forms are there. And also, I think, which is the music bit, that when people gather and are in ensemble without the words, and that you release from the words, and what is that next level of universality? It's sound, and it can be music and vibration. Even for those who have hearing impairment, there's vibration, and that vibration goes to the heart and soul of definitely our planet and whatever other planets are out there. So, yeah, man, good summit.
No, thank you for sharing those your journey um, with its bumps as well as times when it
Surprises
was
that I wasn't
in
prepared for.
ridiculously synchronistic flow. I think it's all good. Hmm, I is there something in particular you want to highlight in terms of, what's alive now as a result of the summit? I think you've alluded to it, you've talked about it in general terms, but is there any more you want to say about that?
Well, what's alive in me is a I guess there's a courage and a confidence that came out of that, just support of knowing there are people who are curious about the work that I'm offering and are willing to help bring it forward. And that continues to embolden the spirit, to liberate this human spirit and move forward. Right. And to get through that tension of, oh gosh, is this just dumb? Is this just my idea that's only resonant with me? And then to say, oh, wow, there's more people who might be into this and be willing to help. And and again, even to this day, we're whatever, over a month and a half, I think now after the phase one or
June
so.
27th began.
Yeah. Yeah. Oof. Um it that's alive. The new connections, the deepening of existing connections, the satisfaction of curiosity of a potential connection for a long time, and 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 what the gifts of those connections now makes possible. So that's really alive me, and
Yeah.
it's alive today because I had a connection with someone who I met for the I really met for the first time at the summit, and yeah, so and I'm learning so much about all these people, and I'm curious and hopeful to learn more.
Cool. Well, I'm wondering if you want to also take a few minutes just to speak a little bit more to your invitation for people that might be listening, and for my benefit too. I have to confess, in my role of kind of creating the container, I did sort of sometimes take that hat off and just show up as a participant or as a host of a particular invitation. And I saw that yours was there, but I didn't dig deeply into it. So I'd love to hear a little bit more too about organizational musicianship and the music of work. I've been using the metaphor of our having a whole bunch of new instruments to sort of explain what it's like to have this technology now, and how we're working with it and what's possible versus what we've been able to do. But I think you're working at a different level with that, and you're a real musician, unlike me, who can barely make a
What?
pleasing noise on his flute anymore. Although I do owe him
Well,
one.
see, and that I think is the possibility that this thing is that the music of work, right? The I think to I'll bring a quote in from John Cage, right? This avant-garde composer who's his thing 4 minutes 33 seconds of silence in the room with the piano. That the room is the music. Everything is music, and I think that I think is underneath all of that. That you, Ben, don't have to play the flute to be an extraordinary virtuoso in the instrument of your choice. That there are principles and practices that if one takes a musician's mind, a professional musician's mindset to, that open up the possibilities for flow, group flow, individual mastery, all this kind of stuff we hear about as applied wordiness into business life. Oh, you got to go for flow. We have to create the environment. You must be engaged, right? So all this bull crap about that. Well, you know who doesn't need to be coerced into engagement? People who love music and love to play it. That the again, my form, and I think you also resonate with this idea of jazz musicians. So jazz musician has mastery and mastery beyond the fingerboard or the drums or the piano, and they transcend their mastery, connect deeply, feeling with whoever is in the ensemble. They don't need some boss of music telling them what to do, and then they have this feeling of, dare I say, love, and to be able to have that love for one another and give that love and be in flow with an audience. Ooh, what if organizational design was based on those kinds of principles? That this decentralized kind of really tightly bound ensembles of folks who communicate with one another on the scene and these venues. And so the idea of organizational musicianship is that it's kind of this arc of, well, there's musicianship in being a musician and what it takes to be professional, amateur, or however you engage with the music. Well, what music? Not the music of sound. It's the music of our profession, the music of working together. And what, again, we talked about before we started recording, what does work mean? Well, this is the work of art, work of love, and and doing that together. What better, what more deep calling, could there be? And to not say, oh, this is just my job. I'm here to be here, whatever, because of, you know, uh, which if you've got your love of whatever you do somewhere else, that's cool too. Then you're a player in this game. You're not the virtuoso, but you're whatever. It's it is having this sense of belonging with an ensemble that, okay, I know who you are. I respect who you are. I have ultimate respect for your human dignity and for the mastery that you have. And if you are in this ensemble, we are playing our instruments together. And if you're struggling, I want to help you. I have an incentive to help you and almost a challenge. I love and accept you. And now what are you going to do to help us make the music better? Right. And that is the spirit that is not, I don't see it much at all when I'm navigating the terrain of our industrial organizations. And that makes me sad. And I think, well, it could be better.
Yeah.
What if as members of organizations, we endeavored to interact with each other from that musical perspective? So yeah, organizational musicianship is playing the music of work and having that be a a metaphor that can be offered. So but I don't want to impose it on anybody. Not everybody digs it right off the top, but so there's more. But that's the general nature of it, and that's what I want to bring to the earth that we have.
What you are bringing.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a beautiful metaphor. I think it really, for me, it really works. And it sounds like you found some people in the summit that it works for. You know, I'm thinking of it in terms of the summit and processes like that, and the next iteration of the summit. And I'd love to have you be a part of the ensemble for that. If there's some way we can, work that in that works for you as well. I think it's a beautiful set of design principles that in some ways maybe, well, I certainly don't think that doing them in a non-organizational context, like this sort of much more open collaboration to produce an event, and then the way you got the musicians and the audience, that's participating in the event, that has a really nice kind of mapping onto what the summit is like too. And so I'd love to play with that some more as we start designing the next. So someone talked about us moving into phase 3 right now, that there's so yes, the summit is over and there's a desire to do another iteration, but there's this period between now and then that we could call, in a sense, phase 3, where, among other things, the summit's still happening. The map's still there. People can still see your invitation. They can still connect themselves to your invitation, and you can still be notified of that, right? And have their email if they have a profile on the map and they put their email there, which almost everybody did. Um, so it's still happening, and there's that, but there's also, how do we think about designing the next iteration, and what does that look like, and who do we partner with, and all. And we're going to be beginning that conversation. I think, we're already sort of starting it, but we need a little rest, and we want to celebrate and do that tomorrow morning as a core group. Anyway,
Mm. We're in the open space now, Ben. I think that's it. So it's a giant month-long open space that we just had. We're having our evening news of that open space, and
well, and
then
Harrison always said, really, the space is always open, and
yeah.
we would get together and say, well, how could we open space for 8 billion people? And in a way, his answer was, that's already happening. It's just, how do we engage skillfully within that context?
Mm,
I think and now we have this amazing new set of instruments to do it with, that
yeah.
didn't exist arguably until 2010. Some in 2010, the ability to gather people for live conversation virtually in large groups and have them move in and out of breakouts first became possible. Before that, you had the internet, you had a lot of text-based exchanges, we were forming groups, we were networking, but we couldn't talk to each other well in large groups virtually. And that became possible. First, it was audio only, then we got Zoom, then Zoom didn't even have breakouts in the beginning. They got that. Anyway, this is new
Yeah.
stuff. This is still very new stuff. The instruments that we have, we've now learned, especially thanks to COVID, which was a big accelerator, right? We're able to
Yeah.
play some simple songs and maybe some slightly more complicated ones. Mostly we're playing the tunes we used to play in the in-person world. So we do a virtual
Mm,
gathering and we try to design it as much like what we know from in-person as possible. The whole point of phase 2. So phase 1 was that for open space, right? Let's design a virtual open space that looks as much like what would happen if we were in a room together as makes sense to us, with a few design tweaks. Phase 2 was to say, what if it doesn't look anything like that, but still follows the same underlying patterns and principles, but it's a very
mm.
different sound to the music, and a very different time frame, because we're not designing something as if everybody had to go home, fairly
Right.
quickly. And so the most we could ask of them would be a day or 2 or 3 or maybe 5 if it's a really long open space. But we certainly
Yeah.
can't have a 4-week long event, right? Um,
Although there's someone who did a 6-week open space, I
I,
think,
you
something like
know,
that.
uh,
But who knows? But I totally get it, and this is really what thinking about and hearing what you're talking about. We're really in the wax recording days, of this
That's,
technology.
maybe we're
And
breaking through that now. I feel
and
like
we're bringing, maybe we're at the point we got vinyl records or 78 RPM records, that the artifacts or the tools
I
of
look at
that
more like we're
technology.
playing though, as opposed to the recording, right? So we want to head towards, improvisational big band jazz, kind of something like that,
Okay.
semi-improvisational, because there's always some structure, especially in a big band format, right? Usually,
Well, yeah,
unless you're Sun Ra, but
so there's a deep cut. I know what you're talking about. And Sun Ra is like organized chaos or Ornette Coleman or whatever.
that
Um,
Coleman, yeah.
so this is I
Was Charlie Hayden with him?
yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
back in
we both
what
absolutely love. And you mentioned Carla Bley before we started recording, and it reminded
oh
me of the thing that the two of them did together, the Liberation Orchestra, the Ballad of the Fallen. I have
oh
that
yeah.
vinyl somewhere, in a closet that I don't even have a record player to play it on, but I'm sure I want to listen to it after we get off of this, or maybe we end by listening to it. I don't know. Anyway,
Yeah, but that'd be great. And I think maybe what and I'm hinting at is the frontier because with this whole idea, I think we talked about the Purple Squirrel Cafe at one
hmm
point, but
hmm
this is kind of my way of having a persistent like this, a persistent, always on place where your assets or whatever you create, they're in this space. The space is themed for a period of time, and there's a boundary and invitation. Because like a cafe, you got a menu. There's a seasonal menu. You have different dishes, different folks come in. Maybe you host a band every once in a while, or maybe you have a poetry reading or something.
Right.
And
It's been possible to do that kind of always open space for years and years. And, you know, where are the really vibrant instances of it? I haven't seen it yet. There's a critical mass thing, there's a desire to focus attention thing, but I'm sure it probably already exists and we just don't know about it, or maybe you do. Um,
well, that's the thing. It's kind of, we're I feel like we're on the vanguard of it, and that if some super uh, connected technology person would come in and kind of say, "Oh, we can do that and that and that," I haven't found it yet. The closest thing I've found was I got together the CEO Wheelo. I think you know Wheelo. We've
Yeah,
talked
which
about
is a
Wheelo
great
before.
tech tool for doing that. Those spatial chat things where you can move yourself around on a screen, and when you get close to somebody, you can hear them. You can even eavesdrop on a little group by getting kind of close, but not quite in
Hmm.
their space, which is so they're trying to mimic what it's like milling around a big room. I think that's
Right.
perfect, and you can plug that into Kiko Chat. And I think the next summit we should try something like that. One of the clear lessons to me from this summit, and I know you weren't complete with your thought, but I'm just going to jump in with this.
That's okay.
One of the
I'll
clear
keep the thought I have.
all right.
I know.
Um, that people really missed having more high bandwidth channels to communicate across the whole group. So the map was beautiful, but they felt constrained by only having that. And yes, there was an email listserv, but hardly anyone was on it. We were only using WhatsApp for tech support, not for general communicating. So how could you send messages to everybody if you wanted to? There were other things, and of course there's lots of tools we could use, right? And we were constantly trying to not overwhelm people with too many different things, but I think there was really a strong desire for that. The email listserv is an obvious one to just get people on up front, right? When you registered, you want to be on the listserv, great, boom, you're there. 80-90% of people are on the listserv, and now we've got a way that everybody can at least message everybody else.
Yeah.
Anyhow, but I think live space too. Let's do can we have a space that's at least there live and a way for somebody to say, hey, I'm going to go there. Anybody else want to join me anytime, spur of the moment, and something can happen, as well as organized events that happen within it, like, what you're describing. Anyway, back to you.
Yeah, well, but I think there's two pieces of that come up. So the thought for me and the desire to take it forward in the convening space and in the digital collaboration space, because I don't travel. So the collaboration that my constraint is that whatever I do, I want it to feel more and more real time with super high quality, resolution audio that is in sync. And there was some tools that were allowing that,
You mean
which
so we can
was
sing in unison?
so we could sing in unison. There was a tool, and there's a tool called Sync Space,
Yeah.
which was out there, and there are a couple tools that are kind of like it, but SyncSpace was as close as there was to there was video and the audio was almost real time because musicians, if you have again,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
have the right bandwidth, they could play together and they had a jazz quartet 500 kilometers apart
right,
playing and it sounded like they were together and grooving,
right.
you know, and so I thought, well, boy, so there's one idea of if to have that kind of latency is one, but if there was just a step down from that, maybe the CD quality audio instead of, cassette quality audio we have here and all this, whatever. But that high resolution audio,
Yeah,
I think is great. And having video there too, because how much better is it when you talk on FaceTime with somebody that you've got this high quality, again, if your connection's good, but this high resolution low latency space, that's what I want to move towards hosting. And in these kind of smaller mid-sized groups, I think that's feasible. And this is maybe one part of the phase two of iteration two of the summit is a desire that I have to host a Purple Squirrel Cafe, whereas there's this set of stuff that happens there around whatever invitation. So I would love to play with that, and maybe that's another invitation for that. Who knows? So
yeah. Well, I
there's
think
lots of
that sounds a
possibility.
little different from the 24/7 kind of drop in, hang out, and connect thing, maybe. I mean, it could be in the same tool, but
Well, there's possibility there. This is
it's a lot
see,
of fun.
there's places to design. So yes, I am excited about what's because I'm in phase three now. I'm still working on my invitation. And that invitation is still alive with me. It is converging on something real in the world, which is what many people complain about in open spaces. It feels great, wonderful, wonderful, but there's no artifacts. But you know what? That the whole start of open space happened. Well, I mean, the big story is the AT&T in Atlanta, right? That they redesigned the pavilion move in Atlanta in 96, and they did it through an open space because there were all the preconditions for open space. But that's another conversation for another day
And
and
I think
another
that was in
riff.
Japan. That was in Atlanta. I know the story of it. It was like was a pavilion. I had a stadium in Japan in my mind, but it's got to be the same story.
That well, there may be another one,
Unless
but
there was another one too. Harrison used to tell it a lot. I agree.
well, may he rest in peace and rest in space.
Thank you, Harrison.
Hmm.
I
Well, would
remember.
you? Oh, go ahead.
No, it's fine. What were you gonna say?
I was just going to say, based on what I've shared here, is there anything that you want to reflect upon or share about that before we land this beautiful spaceship?
Um, I'm delighted to hear your story and your experience, and it's funny because even I had forgotten too that insane synchronicity on the LinkedIn messaging. and, and I
Nobody
didn't know the
need.
backstory that it came through the Open Space Institute. I did see Harold briefly, which was nice. Um, and so it's just, it's hugely validating, including, you're naming the challenges that you did experience with the tech, but your willingness to work through it, which I think is a key part of um the field we're trying to build, right?
Yeah.
I had this, like, I've been, because I was in the role of dealing with all the people for whom the tech wasn't working, or who were confused, or wanted to work and couldn't. Sometimes I wasn't, because they would just get frustrated and quit, and I would maybe hear about it later, maybe not. And we have these questions about how much of the tech we use is good enough to keep on using, and how do we make it easier in the cases where it was difficult, and what do we do about all that. So we're wrestling with that. But I hear the spirit with which you approached it is the spirit I want to see if we can invite for as part of the context for the next summit, is to say, we know this technology isn't perfect. understand that this technology was built by individual people on, as acts of love because they wanted, in the case of Lucas, to have a better platform to do live open space. Or in the case of Christine Capra and her husband, Tim Hansen, who created SumApp, because they saw the powerful potential for being able to collect relationship data from a whole network, um, and not
Mm.
just profile data. So I can not just put myself on a map, but I can say something about my relationship to everybody else on that map. That technology didn't exist. They went and built it as a labor of love. Is it perfect? No, SumApp is not perfect, but SumApp is good enough to let us do things if we're willing to play with it. Ditto with Kumu, right? They could have sold out to big tech. They've got a really great base. They're a little more advanced, but Kumu's hard to use. It's hard to figure out how to navigate the maps. Does that mean we should throw up our hands and say, oh, this sucks, I'm not going to play? No. Is there a different way we can invite people to say, um, this is either this is an instrument worth learning how to play, and
Mhm.
it's like the harmonica or the recorder, it's not the violin. Okay, you can
Or bagpipes.
or bagpipes, right? It really isn't. Not only that, but if you want to hear a particular tune, you can also ask somebody else to play it for you because they really know how to do it. So, don't understand the tool's value as solely being based on your skill level with it. So embrace it to say, because the pattern has been, you know, that let's only use the tech that everybody can use. And if it's too hard for everybody to use, then we shouldn't use it because then we're not being inclusive and we lose diversity. And diversity and inclusion and equity are massively important. They're part of, a co-create a world that works for all. In some ways, that's about saying, how do we create a world that's inclusive and diverse and has equity? So we've got a polarity there to manage. And what I want to set the context for better than we did the last time is to say, if we promise you that whatever your level of technology capacity is, including zero, right? Like the only way you can connect into this is if somebody meets with you in person and you talk to them.
Mm.
Or,
Mhm.
next level up, you can get on WhatsApp and message, or next level up, you can get on a Zoom call. But whatever your level is, all the way from that to, I can use 15 different things, that you can participate in a way that is meaningful and valuable, such that you have gotten, your time was really well spent. You have been able to receive things of value and you've been able to contribute things of value, and you are happy with that and you would do it again in a heartbeat, right? I think we can offer that without, and say, we can put as much tech into this as we want. For everything we used here, we didn't use Welo, we didn't use mural boards, we didn't use, code digital. There's so much cool stuff out there, and so much of it requires a group to use it for it to be worth a damn. And so
Yes.
you need people that care about the same thing and want to connect and are willing to play with the tech in order to even learn whether the tech is any good or not, right?
And that to me was the breakthrough of this summit because there were enough people who took the time to go through the whole process, to show up on the map, to connect to invitations, to say maybe some map feels a little weird. I don't know where to go. They went for help. They went to the WhatsApp group, and even folks who are like kind of the 80% of the level of technical expertise. Maybe I'm there. I don't know. Maybe I'm not. But then there was still a place where we could get there. So, okay, this is possible, right? This is possible to get however many, whatever, of the 600 registrants. I don't know how many showed up on the map, but
Almost
uh,
all.
so there you go. Um, and
Yeah,
and
and,
that if
and
the
with
map,
contact info and some statement about why they're here at the very least, right? And often much
it's
more than that.
who needs another? So why? So then the effort, maybe the effort is okay. What is possible to make these tools better? What's possible to connect them in a more inclusive and diverse way, and to say, okay, that these are a strong backbone. It's like we don't we don't need a whole lot more social pro-social convening. ways of being, right? So we got open space, world cafe, art of hosting, six conversations. I mean, all of these ways of human collaboration, we have great tools there too. There's room for more. There's room for more, and they can
Well,
get better.
and when they come into a virtual or a hybrid space, they get reimagined, which is kind of what we do with phase two. And they start blending and combining. And we did a pro action cafe in person as part of the summit. You said you don't travel. Is that
Well,
like
I
literally
was
at
there
only
in
at your
this live
house, or
stream.
how far of a radius do you actually get out and about?
About maybe an hour, maybe
Okay.
2 hours, like to
So
Columbus or Indianapolis or something.
how many couple million people live within that radius?
Yeah, probably 4 million.
Four
Yeah,
million.
between
Okay.
all this stuff.
Okay. So we had four in-person things that happened as a result of the summit that got, you know, that I know about, that got organized. Um, but I looked at the geo map, and there were clusters everywhere, right? Pretty much, I mean, there could have been 40 different little in-person meetings. And of course, they don't have to even be little, right? Because like I went to DC and we put out a general invite, and people came who hadn't even heard about the summit, right? And then they were part of the summit
And I forgot that we could actually do a geo map. And I would have done it if I remembered that I could do a geo from the Kumu map, you know?
to see where
And it's
people
like,
were.
yeah, it's like,
Right.
oh,
Or
there's
well,
someone
the
there.
Kumu map also had the languages people wanted to speak, and I don't think anybody tried to convene a conversation in a language other than English by seeing who else wanted to speak Hindi or Swahili. But there were people. It was not an insignificant number.
So we're playing these instruments like a high school marching band, pretty good high school marching band. Now, what if we
Right.
moved it up to college orchestra or professional orchestra
Right.
or God love us, many little jazz ensembles? Just imagine the
Right.
possibilities.
Without people dropping out by saying, well, that's never going to be me, right? I think that's the polarity on the inclusivity piece. And so I'm doing a lot of design thinking around that, because I mean, the biggest divide by far are the people who have, basically no tech access, right? They don't have the
Yeah.
internet, or they don't have a device, and that's a lot of the world. And so, if we really are serious about creating, never mind a world that works for all, just an open space that can engage everybody who wants to show up, we need that. And, really having that leaning into the hybrid element and having the in-person be much more significant, and creating the capacity to bridge the two. Well, I think that's the huge goal. But even setting aside, saying, all right, we're going to do an event, that's mostly virtual, but still have it be really inclusive and use all the tech we want to use. Say
Well,
this is tech playground, and instead of being afraid of it, we're going to just say anybody's got a thing you want to play with, invitation to play with that thing, or incorporate it into your invitation, and whoever wants to can. It's law of 2 feet. Um,
and this and you just brought up something for me that it doesn't have to be a world that works for all. It can be an invitation that anyone can respond to. And that the whole if as these summits grow, that if they are all if the invitation is there, someone hears it and they can respond to it in any way from beginning to middle to end. I think that's how those 8 billion conversations, not just that they just happen, is that they happen and can get better and get generative of something. And I think those are just themes that are so fun to ride with and go into.
yeah. And I hear 8 billion, and like, on the one hand, I think of Harrison and other people, and the part of me is like, well, the tech isn't ready for that either. At least
No.
not in the literal sense. We're already doing it in some sense, but I just checked. We had 405 people on the map. We had, I think, 580 registrants. I thought the percentage was a little higher for map. No, but that's about 80%, more
Well,
than.
considering that you get 10% of people who go to a meetup that you post, I mean that at best, no.
Yeah,
Um,
so that's great. And to say, can we get to 10 times that. That's probably the limits of the technology right now, in certain respects, but not in others, depending. Anyway, but that would be
Well,
amazing, right? Then I think you could have your 24/7 live engagement space be quite vibrant, like an all-night cafe kind of thing.
mhm.
And I think and that's totally within our reach and would be a phenomenally powerful offering, right? There's nothing else going on like that.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, it doesn't have to be 8 billion minus 600. It can be 600 times 10, And I think that maybe is the
as a starting
flipping and the
point, right?
possibility.
We'll get to the other thing, but I mean that there's all kinds of other questions. We could chat for a long time and keep riffing on all of this, couldn't we? But I just want to appreciate your invitation back to me to sort of say where because it got me into my own sort of reflections, and we got some good jazz rhythms going here, and so this has been delightful, Ryan. A really nice way to reconnect with you because we've been kind of trying to find our rhythm for a couple of years now, right? Going all the way back to
Yeah.
the Bioregional Regeneration Summit and some the weaving in the valley stuff that happened after that, and conversation weaving as a methodology, and I mean, in a way, phase two really was was conversation weaving, and my best experiment in that so far. Um, so you've been along for that journey, and we've also been trying to get in sync, or we made some efforts, and it's all fine. It's all good. I really feel like we got to a new place of coherence, you and I, through the summit, but also especially with this call. So thank you.
Well, it took two albums for Yes to get on their right track before for the Yes album. And then,
Is
Close to
that
the
right? I
Edge,
don't even what were the albums before the Yes album?
well, it was Yes, Time and the Word, the Yes album, then Fragile, then Close to the Edge. Right? It took them 5 albums to get to Close to the Edge.
Which was an
Um,
absolute masterpiece, like one of the most perfect pieces of recording ever made, I think.
it stands the test. It has stood the test of time for over 50 years. You can listen to Close to the Edge by Yes today,
Yeah.
and it still
My
hits as
favorite's
hard as it did
actually
in
is it
72.
called The Teacher, the second side?
Um,
What's
oh,
the
okay,
second
well,
side? Or that's a
well, there's
subset
and
of
well,
Sweet.
there's And You and I, and
And
then
You and I.
there's Siberian Katra. I mean, the whole album is just fantastic.
Well, I think the first
Um,
side is called Close to the Edge, and the second side is And You and I, right?
it's first size Close to the Edge completely, 19 minutes and 38 seconds, I think. Then And You and I for about 10 minutes, and
Oh, and then there is
then
Siberian Khatru, right, right.
yeah,
So
and
And You and I think is I love it all, but that's the piece that I've put on many a playlist. And You and I.
and You and I.
Climb
That's the
closer
we that
towards
is
the
today.
music. Is that how it goes?
Hmm.
Here, we should listen to it. I'll stop the recording.
Hmm. Oh, I love that.
If you're finally ready to
Oh,
take a trip
try it.
without the kids,
Hmm.
YouTube just starts playing even when you don't want it to. All right.